Hello, my name is Shannon Stewart. I'm part of the Cleveland History Center's Education Department. Thank you for joining us for a Cleveland History Explorer video. Today we're talking about immigration to Cleveland. We're going to look at the story of immigration and the waves of different immigrant groups that came to the city. We'll look at vocabulary, and then we're also going to have an activity based on primary sources. You can see there's some sources that are attached here with the video, and we're actually going to build the story of a real family, an immigrant family named the O'Briens. And you'll have a chance to kind of investigate their sources and build their story on your own after the video today. Now, the activity is really made for students in grades 3 and up, but we do have some additional suggestions for family learning and some additional resources for learners of all age as well. So let's get into our vocabulary. We're going to look at the term immigrant. An immigrant is a person who leaves their home country to come to a new country. Whereas a migrant is someone who leaves one part of their country, so their home in one state, and moves to a new state or a new area in the same country. So immigrants are coming from country A and they're going to country B. Migrants are living in one part of the country and they're going to a new part of the same country. And either immigrants or migrants can be refugees. Being a refugee is not about where you're traveling from or to, it's about why you're leaving. So a refugee is someone who is no longer safe in their home area or home country. It could be because of a war, it could be a natural disaster, it could be due to persecution. Persecution is when an individual or group is targeted. They're treated unfairly based on who they are. So it might be about their religion, it might be the language that they speak, it could be the way they look, the color of their skin. Any of those things are something that someone might be persecuted for, and that would definitely make a refugee unsafe in their home. So we've seen immigrants, migrants, and refugees call Cleveland home for years. And we still see a vibrant immigrant community and refugee community in Cleveland today. Now, that idea of a refugee leaving because they're unsafe, we're considering that are push factors. So any immigrant or migrant might have a push factor. That's why they need to leave, something that's making them want to leave their home. A pull factor is a reason why they're coming somewhere. So what is the benefit of coming to Cleveland? So a push factor is why you're leaving. A pull factor is what's bringing you here. Pull factors often have to do with education or with job opportunities. And we'll see these push and pull factors change over time. And that's one thing that helps to make those waves of immigration is that when your push and pull factors change, it often brings different groups to your city as well. And we'll see that happen through Cleveland history. So let's start with our first kind of early immigrant wave. We're looking in the 1820s is when immigration really begins here in Cleveland. And we see people coming here, they're being pulled because of the Ohio Erie Canal. And this is an image of the canal. Basically looks like a stream or a river. And a canal is a man-made waterway. So our first immigrant groups, like the Irish and the Germans, are coming here to help build the Ohio Erie Canal. And the immigrant family that we're talking about today is the O'Brien family. Michael O'Brien is the father, and he is pulled from Ireland to come here to find work. And he starts working with the Ohio Erie Canal. But it's finished in 1832, and Michael gets out here in the 1840s. So there's not a lot of work left on the Ohio Erie Canal. Instead, he begins working on the docks down in Cleveland, down by the river. Now, this was a big pull factor for many immigrants during the 1870s, especially because Cleveland is a booming industrial city. That means that we're making a lot of stuff here in Cleveland, and we're making a lot of steel. So ships, and you can see in this image, this is a picture of the Cuyahoga River, and you can see these great tall ships that are coming down the river, and they're bringing in the raw materials that you need to make stuff, like make our steel. They're also going to take out a lot of the things that they're making here in Cleveland, and they're going to take it out to the rest of the country and the rest of the world. So Michael and many other Irish and German immigrants especially get jobs on the docks. They are unloading and reloading these ships. And they also start working in the steel mills themselves. Now, Michael is pulled here because of this work, but there's also a large push factor at play. And at this time, there's something called the potato famine that's happening back in Ireland. This is a lack of food, is what a famine is. In this case, potatoes. There is a disease or a fungus that's attacking the potatoes in Ireland and making them inedible. So people can't eat the potatoes that they've been growing. And unfortunately, for many Irish people, especially Irish farmers, that's their main source of food. They're eating potatoes as part of their breakfast, lunch, and dinner sometimes. So without the potatoes, a lot of people are going hungry. And that means a lot of people end up dying in Ireland because of the potato famine. So that is definitely a big push factor for a lot of Irish immigrants during the 1840s, especially. So Michael is pushed because of the potato famine, and he's pulled here to Cleveland because of the job opportunities. Now, our next big immigrant group is going to come in the 1870s. And this is when we see a lot of European groups begin to come here to Cleveland and to come to America in general. We'll see Italians coming to Cleveland at this time. We also see Austro-Hungarians, Slovenes, Slovaks. Lots of people from different parts of Europe are going to be coming to call Cleveland home. We also see a lot of Jewish peoples coming from the Russia area. And at this time, there's a lot of persecution against Jewish peoples in Russia. So they're going to be coming here to America and coming to Cleveland to start some of our first Jewish communities in Cleveland as well. Then the World War I breaks out. And from 1914 to 1945, we really don't see a lot of European immigration. There is some very strict immigration laws here in the United States. And while we see some refugee groups, some small groups of people who are being pushed out of Europe because of the wars, we don't see the big numbers that we used to see here in Cleveland. At the same time, that industry that we talked about is booming. We're making lots of steel, we're making lots of cars at this point. And so we have lots of jobs that are available. And a lot of these are jobs that the new immigrants especially used to work at on the docks and the steel mills. So while we still have immigrants and we have their descendants or their families here in Cleveland working these jobs, there's still a lot of new jobs that are ready for people to start filling in. So we see the new jobs as a pull factor here in Cleveland for a lot of different migrant groups. Remember, a migrant is someone who's coming in within the same country they're moving around. So we especially see lots of African American migrants coming from southern states. They're being pulled up to Cleveland because of their jobs, but they're also being pushed out of the southern states because of racism. We see things like segregation and Jim Crow laws that are creating a lot of violence for people of color down in the southern states. So we see a lot of our African American citizens are moving from the southern states. They're trying to find new jobs in industrial cities like Cleveland in the north. They're also looking to get away from a lot of that, the violence due to racism. It's not to say there wasn't racism, segregation, and violence in the north, because there is, even in Cleveland. But many families feel this is the only way that they can survive, is by leaving their homes to come up to find better jobs here in the north. So this is really when we see the African American community in Cleveland really expands during these years. The image that we have here is a painting from the Cleveland History Center of the Future Outlook League. And this is a group that was established in 1935. And they're really here to help a lot of those new African American migrants and help connect them to those jobs that they're coming here in search of. Our next kind of wave of immigration here in Cleveland comes in 1945. And we begin to see new immigrant groups. So especially people from Puerto Rico, like our image here is a father and son that actually saw an advertisement for some of our factories and steel mills in Puerto Rico. They see the advertisements in Puerto Rico and it pulls them here to Cleveland to find these jobs. So 1945, we begin to see Puerto Rican peoples. We see people from Mexico and from Cuba coming up here in search of jobs. By 1965, when a lot of our immigration laws start to change, we'll see bigger groups coming from China and Korea and India again as well. And those people are really being pulled here because of our new education opportunities and also for our growing medical and research fields as well. So again, those pull factors will change over time. Lastly, when we talk about immigration in Cleveland, 1970 really starts kind of a new era in immigration. So 1945, we start to see new groups. By the 1970s, we see smaller groups, but from more places. So instead of having large communities like the Irish and the Germans that came over first, now we see lots of little groups from all over the world. We're going to see peoples from Vietnam. We have Guatemalan peoples coming. Then we see groups from the Middle East, from Eastern European countries. So we see lots of people, but in much smaller numbers, coming to call Cleveland home. But all these groups and all these ways of immigration have in common is they often start their own communities or neighborhoods. And in the beginning, a lot of times these neighborhoods look and sound a lot like the neighborhoods they left behind. The Irish were one of the first groups to really create their own neighborhood here in Cleveland. This map, a little hard to see, but they begin building Irishtown, or later known as the Angle, right along the Cuyahoga River. So you can see the river kind of bends back on itself, and inside that bend, what we call the Oxbow Bend, is where Irishtown, or later the Angle, was established. So people are living real close to where they're working. Especially for the Irish, that's on the docks, and then in the steel mills. Those are all located right there along the bend in the Cuyahoga River. Our German communities will also establish their own beer gardens. And these are places that they're used to visiting back in Germany. It's places where they can talk together and share their stories. They'll also start German language newspapers as well. And through the years, many different culture groups do the same thing. They set up their own neighborhoods and they begin to change Cleveland as a city. Today, many of these neighborhoods still exist. We see Little Italy and Asia Town, which was originally Chinatown here in Cleveland, are both still thriving neighborhoods with lots of businesses. In fact, today we have a very diverse immigrant community. This is a really great image. It's from Global Cleveland. You can find it at globalcleveland.org. And this is a map of modern day immigrant and refugee owned restaurants, especially. We see a lot of our immigrant groups share their culture through food. And we've seen Cleveland change, especially through the foods, as well as the religions and languages, ideas and beliefs that our different immigrant communities have brought us over time. Now, we hope and are excited for you to come back to the Cleveland History Center sometime soon to investigate some of these immigrant communities more, to learn more about these immigrant entrepreneurs that started businesses here in Cleveland. But while you're at home, there are lots of ways to connect to this history of immigration. The first thing that we would suggest as a family is to look at your own family heritage. We do a lot of genealogy, which is the study of your own family at the Cleveland History Center, especially with our library and archives. And we've attached a few different family trees for you to get started with. And when we're back up and running, you can come visit us at the archives and learn how to really get into researching your ancestors. But start with just a family conversation about your grandparents and their parents, aunts and uncles, and you can get a lot of great stories that way. I also recommend you kind of investigate a culture. It could be one of the groups that we talked about today or something from your own heritage, and learn more about it. Learn some of the language, or even better, learn a traditional recipe. And you'll find a scone recipe attached, actually, if you're interested in learning more about the Irish family that we're looking at, the O'Brien family. There's a recipe for scones that was passed down in my family from my own Irish grandmother as well. So you can try making those at home. And then, of course, you can tackle our activity. You'll find the primary sources attached as well as a worksheet. You'll just work with those sources to answer the questions on your worksheet to learn more about the O'Brien family. Well, thank you for joining us. We hope you stay safe and healthy, and we'll look forward to seeing you at the Cleveland History Center sometime soon.